Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Kingdom of Amalur Reckoning. Well, re-reckoning, actually, because the previous reckoning wasn't reckoned enough. No, we need to have another one to best all previous reckonings. To reckon again where no one has reckoned before. All dumb jokes aside, Kingdom of Reckoning. Sure, let's go with it. Kingdom of Reckoning is a remaster, essentially, of the older Kingdom of Amalur game, and it's pretty much exactly the same game, with exactly the same quests, enemies, weapons, equipment, everything, except it's got a bit of a visual slash graphical remaster feel going for it, and I think it's available in 4K now, and also, the controls feel slightly more, well, they feel a bit better. Slightly more precise, slightly more crisp, so on and so forth. At least playing now on mouse and keyboard. Back in the day I played this game on controller, so it wasn't really that much of an issue, but I know that playing on mouse and keyboard back when the game was originally released, it was... it wasn't the best, but it was serviceable. Anyways, because this game was relatively... I mean, it was successful in the sense of it was a phenomenal game and the people that did play it enjoyed it. However, it wasn't the most popular game ever, and it didn't exactly bring in a huge amount of profit to the developers or publishers. I'm going to talk a little bit about the original game, because it is essentially this game, just minus the graphical nuances, if you will. And I'll get to the graphical nuances in a bit, which, you know, TLDR of it is, I'm not overly impressed by them, and I will skip through all the cutscenes, because I don't want to spoil anything. For any of you that you know, haven't played the game and want to have a go yourselves, this is the very beginning of the game, so I'm not giving away anything that that might potentially you know, ruin your experience with the story. So, with that said, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, the first one, was an action RPG, but the only problem with the game was when it came out. It was competing with a lot of different games. One of them was Skyrim. Yeah. If you're gonna make an RPG that competes with Skyrim, well, just don't. Mainly because, you know, it doesn't matter how good your game is, the whole PR behind Skyrim and then the publicity behind it and, you know, the whole hype built behind a Bethesda RPG is not something that you're ever really going to be able to beat, so, you know, to that end, that was one of the game's main problems. To make matters worse and to put things into perspective a little bit more, Skyrim did come out on November 11th, 2011, and the only reason I remember that is because it's 11/11/2011. And then this game did come, well, not this game, this is Re-Reckoning, but the original did come out in, I believe it was 2012, early February or late February, I don't recall exactly. I'm kind of amazed that I remember all of these things off the top of my head, to be honest. So, to put things into perspective, this was around the time that DLC started coming out for Skyrim. This was around the time where Torchlight 2 released and was, you know, not exactly similar, it was more of a Diablo-type game, but it was sort of in the competition, right, for people's attention and stuff. And Torchlight 2 was pretty darn amazing, and, you know, still is actively being played today. Also, Borderlands 2 came out, though later during the year. It was a very busy year in terms of releases, and Dishonored came out that year as well. A lot of these games which took up a lot of people's time and were, you know, took up a lot of people's money as well. Amalur was never really, you know, never really got that amount of hype, never really got that amount of exposure, which was the reason why the game wasn't as successful as I believe it should have been. So, its problem was when it was released in its competition, right? Well, what about the game itself? What problems does it have? Well, shockingly little. I mean, I suppose we could pick at the customization options not being, you know, all there, and we could pick at some quality of life features here and there, but on the whole, Kingdom of Amalur was one of the greatest action RPGs I've played to date, more or less. Let me just dodge out of the way here. So what it promised was, and what it delivered really, was a very interesting combat system, which you can't exactly see here because it's the tutorial of the game, and sort of a quality of it, I would say, is that it introduces things gradually, from dodge to block to different weapons to magic to skills, etc, etc, and then you get all the actually cool stuff after the tutorial. Yes, you get introduced to pretty much the magic and all the different weapons in the tutorial, but the coolest things get introduced afterwards. So it was a combat-oriented and a combat-focused game, but the story behind it was also really, really interesting, and the reason I'm doing this video like this is I don't want to spoil literally anything, or literally any part of the story. I'm going to leave that all to you to discover for yourselves. So I won't really talk about it other than mention that it was a really, really interesting story, and a lot of the side quests, while some of them were just basically fetch quests, a lot of them were really fun to do, and a lot of them were nuanced for the time, right? You saw some things that you really wouldn't expect to do in many games, and it strode this fine line between going from place to place to just kill enemies and monsters and fight bosses to actually RPG elements, right? Oh, well, this is one heck of a powerful weapon, alright. Okay. Not as powerful as I remember the bow, but, you know, maybe there were some balance changes. Now, I'd also like to mention one of the sort of fundamental reasons why this game did so well. Or not necessarily did so well financially, but was such a successful title, at least with the amount of people and with the fan base that did try it. You'll be hard-pressed to find people that didn't enjoy this game, and for quite a while it's had quite a religious and zealous following, and I mean that in the most positive of ways, of course. So, I'd like to talk about... Yes, shush. I'd like to talk about the combination of things that every RPG has, and this is something that maybe you don't exactly pay much attention to, or don't really take into consideration all that much, but I think it is pretty darn important. So, what am I talking about? Well, every RPG, and this, you know, mostly just my opinion and so on and so forth, but, you know, I would say that every RPG strikes a balance between various things. You could say that every game does this, but RPGs in particular strike a balance between the focus being on the story, the dialogue, and the characters, and the focus being on the gameplay, the mechanics, the exploration, so on and so forth, the atmosphere. And you'll be hard-pressed to find an RPG that does equally in all of these aspects, right? So, for example, I'll just name a few of the RPGs that I've played previously, and you know that were pretty much and are still my favorite. So let's say Mass Effect, right? One of my all-time favorite RPGs. It focuses primarily on the story, on the characters, the dialogue, the choices you make in the story, and the sort of narrative, right? Exploration and combat are, let's be honest here, kind of secondary. Now, that doesn't mean that a game has bad combat or whatever, but in Mass Effect 1 especially, you know, the combat wasn't that great. Its primary focus, like I said, is the story. Let's focus on something like Skyrim, right? Much beloved by all. The combat in Skyrim is not terrible by any means, but the game's primary focus, and the reason I think the game is so successful everywhere around the world, and, you know, is still being ported over to God knows what, probably my toaster's going to be able to play it eventually. The reason, I think, is freedom. It allows you a lot of freedom in choosing what quests to do, what sort of character to build, what part of the story or what part of the world to focus on. The builds that you make with your character, may be he an archer, a thief, a mage, whatever. It's this sort of freedom that I think lends itself very well to a successful game. So this sort of combination of things, you know, for example, you have other RPGs that focus a lot on atmosphere and the world and the different places that you get to explore, rather than the gameplay or the freedom of choice and character and so on and so forth. So this is a long introduction to what I'm about to talk about. Yes, this is a long introduction to what I wanted to say. However, I think it is a important one because Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning might not be the greatest RPG ever created, but I'm arguing that there is no such thing. It all depends on what you prefer your focus to be. So, with that said, after this 5-minute long intro into what I'm about to say, the game does extraordinarily well in what it focuses on, right? And what it focuses on are two things: the story and the combat. The combat in this game is among the best I've played in an RPG. Now, currently, you might not see that because, like I said, it gets introduced gradually, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. So, as you've seen, you have different weaponry that you can use. So you have staves, swords, you're later going to have, well, actually you sword daggers, you have, later you're going to find out new types and classes of weapon that I'm not going to spoil, because when I found them I was quite amazed. Because you sort of, you know, you grow comfortable with your swords and staves and bows, and you're like, alright, this is what the game has for me. No. This speaks volumes about its variety, and then I'll focus on that a little bit later, but the reason combat is so mind-bogglingly good in this game is it doesn't specialize. What I mean is, whilst you may not have the greatest of freedoms when it comes to world building, exploration, choosing your quests, so on and so forth, the game focuses on... well, the game is a lot more focused, period, right? The combat here is a lot more mixed. You can use a fire staff, a dagger, and a bow at the same time on the same character, and not really be at a disadvantage. What I mean is, the game focuses you to use a variety of weapons, resources, and tools to defeat your enemies. Now, you can absolutely specialize into one particular field if you want, but you're going to find quite a lot of various enemies that are weak to different things. Magic, fire, blunt damage, piercing damage, so on and so forth, that you're going to be forced to switch weapons, forced to switch your combat styles. And on top of that, the game gives you an enormous variety of ways to deal with the opposition. So, it's not just a hack and slash, if you will, but later, as you progress through the game, you're going to figure out that there is just an unending variety of ways to approach combat. From stealth, to traps, to potions, to poisons, to magic, to staves, to so on and so forth. Especially in 2012, this was unprecedented. This much freedom was, okay, maybe not as revolutionary, but the way it utilized all of these different elements, the way it didn't lock them away behind every character class, so staves only get to be used by mages and they're locked away for fighters. No, the way you could mix everything together, and again I'll skip everything, the way you could mix everything together was... What do you mean, wait, where am I going?
We've got to get you to safety. Too much to explain what's important.
Sorry, give me a second.
But I can ensure absolute. It's just a gift. Wait. Fascinating. Simply astounding.
Skip. Okay, good. Don't want to spoil anything, like I said. Well, as little as possible at the very least. So, anyways, also, speaking of variety, it's not just the combat variety and the weapon variety that you're going to experience here, it's variety, period. So, from enemies, which was at the time truly, truly mind-boggling, that every single, or at least more or less every single area you go to has a new set of foes with new resistances, abilities, attacks, quirks, etc., that you're going to need to deal with. This was fascinating because in other RPGs you get introduced to enemies gradually, but they repeat throughout the game, right? Now, this is not to say that I'm never going to fight Tuatha again in my life, obviously, no, that's not a good thing either, right? But my point is that there is a stupid amount of variety to the enemies. And I remember very late into the game, around level, I want to say like 40, not sure what level I was, but I have played this game in 2012, so, you know, you'll forgive me if I misremember some details. But I do remember that in the late game, I was still being introduced to new enemies, and I found this area where, like, plants basically were the main antagonists, right? And I remember it being an extraordinarily difficult area, and all of these things were just, you know, amazing for me at the time, because I didn't expect to be introduced to new enemies on a regular basis, like 10, 12, even 20 hours into the title, and I expected to see maybe various trolls and wolves and so on and so forth at the beginning of the game, and then maybe bosses later down the line, but through and through the entire thing, I was still being, you know, I was still being amazed by the amount of variety there was, and it was at this time that new weapon types started showing up. Yes, in the late game, I found new weapon types that I didn't have access to before. This was strange, refreshing, and absolutely amazing. So yeah, anyways. Speaking of variety, and on the topic again, and at the risk of sounding like a parrot or repeating myself, another aspect in which the game excelled is area variety. So, sometimes, you know, one area looks like another, and, you know, it is the case, there's not much you can do to avoid such a thing. However, it was, like I said, up until the end of the game itself that I was constantly being introduced to new areas, completely different ones in terms of the atmosphere, the visuals, the aesthetics, and so on and so forth. So if on one given set of ooh, I completely forgot about this being a thing. Never mind. If on one like set of missions and one part of the story I was in the woods or a small town or something along those lines, the next I would be in the desert. After that I would be in some sort of dark lands of all sorts of chaos-corrupted horrors and so on and so forth, to use Warhammer terminology. It was truly, truly fascinating. So again, it didn't do everything perfectly. It didn't focus on everything equally, but the things that the game did focus on, the combat, the story, which, you know, wasn't the best ever, but it kept me intrigued, it kept me hooked, and I was very interested to see where it progressed, because it was kind of surprising. It starts off a little bit cliche and kind of simple, with the evil Tuatha coming to destroy us all and you need to save them, and no, okay, that's not actually the story, you're more sort of, you know, the game starts with you dying, so, you know, you're sort of more there for the ride and trying to figure out what's going on. But it amps up as you go along. It's not this, you need to save everyone from stuff and then, you know, get on with it. It amps up as you go through, and it pretty much keeps you interested in it. And it only has 3 tech trees like this, you see? And yet still, the game introduces a mind-numbing amount of variety in combat with both magic and stuff like that. So yeah. I'll spend points on this later. Let's confirm. Oh no, I can't. Okay, give me a second, and I'll figure out how I want to build my character because I haven't actually thought about this yet. All right, that done. There is also this, which is a moves list. Yeah, it's kind of like Mortal Kombat style. So for example, you have this, which is upheaval, and then you unlock more of these as you go along. It contributes to a dynamic combat system, right? I think that's one of the key features of the game. It's not just a hack and slash of you clicking enemies time and time again. This is thought out. You need to use different moves, and even though you may have a limited number of skills and abilities, the way you combine these with short attack, heavy attack, and then this, and maybe switching a weapon, hitting them a few times with this, and then switching to your other weapon, all of these things contribute to the game being immensely fun to play, with just some of the best combat in an RPG maybe ever, right? And then that's like, again, not even the whole story. You unlock more stuff as you go along, like I mentioned. So yeah, overall, I do want to talk about a little bit like that was Kingdoms of Amalur, right? And it's kind of sad that the game didn't get much in the way of attention. I mean, it did, but didn't get that much in the way of attention. Because, I understand people were playing different things, but, I mean, look at this. You're fighting multiple wolves, and you can't help but feel like a badass doing this, right? Due to the way the pacing of the combat works as well. So, it's not that you get those long, wind-up attacks by the enemies, and they all come at you one at a time. No, you actually, I mean, it is gamey, because, in a more realistic sense, they would all jump me at the same time, and that wouldn't be a problem, but the game creates a good pace of attack, dodge, cast spell, dodge, block, so on and so forth, that really it keeps you focused, it keeps you there, it keeps you hooked to the actual combat, it keeps you interested, it keeps you, basically grabs your attention, right? So yeah, anyways, with that said, I do want to talk about the remastered version a little bit now, and, well, here's where I'm going to be a little bit more critical of the game, because I've been singing it high praise so far. It's not that remastered. I mean, don't get me wrong, it feels better than the previous game, it plays better, well, I keep saying the previous game, it feels better than the original, it plays better. Visually, it does look better. 4K support is always welcome, of course, but if you don't have a 4K monitor or a TV or whatever you're going to play this on, I was expecting a little bit more in terms of the lighting, the visual fidelity, the just resolution of textures, if I'm honest with you. I would have hoped for something better than this, simply because I like the game so much and that I truly believe that it deserves all of this. But, be that as it may, this is what we got, and, it makes the game a little bit more modern, it updates it, so I wouldn't say it's a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. I just expected a little bit more from it when I saw it's going to get a Re-Reckoning, but, like I said, oh god. I think this is where I die. Maybe shouldn't have fought these things yet. Oh, maybe I... Jesus, come on! Oh, okay, I need to focus a little bit more on what I'm doing. I need to shut up for a second, because these are not... Oh, I did not expect that. I dodged early. I am playing this on a very hard difficulty as well, so, I wouldn't be struggling as much early game. But it is not an easy game. Well, I mean, you know, obviously it'll all depend on the difficulty you're playing at, but later down the line, the bosses do get rather challenging on higher difficulties, so yeah, alright. I apologise for zoning out, but I sort of had to. Right. So, all of that being said and done, you also do later get, like, blacksmithing and crafting and stuff like that, which I think adds to the depth of the game and makes it more interesting in the long run as well. But anyways, it's a terrible dodge. I think that'll be about it as far as this first impression / preview video is concerned. Now, I do want to answer basically one simple question here: is this worth your time? So if you've played Kingdoms of Amalur, the original one, prior to the Re-Reckoning, I wouldn't say that there's anything revolutionary here that you haven't seen already. I mean, it's practically the same game, and graphically it doesn't really look all that different either. I mean, it's an upgrade, certainly, but it's not, you know, not the end of the world, and it's not a horribly, it's a good upgrade, but it's not perfect, you know. I would have expected a little bit more. That said, let's use the bow here a little bit. Yeah, considerably, oops. Considerably less damaging than, I mean, god freaking damn it, right? Alright, ultimately, would I recommend the game? Well, if you haven't played it, absolutely. I do think that simply because of the combat, and you know, obviously if a combat-oriented RPG is something that interests you, then yes, absolutely. Provided that you don't, you know, absolutely hate the graphic style or whatever. I'm sorry, I cannot focus. There's too freaking many of them. There's two. That's like way more than one. Yes, I'm making fun of myself, basically. Alright, good. I should probably lower the difficulty while recording at the very least, but hey. So ultimately, would I recommend it? Absolutely. Like I said, if you haven't played the game in the past, if you have but just don't remember it, then you know, obviously give it a shot, but don't expect the game to do anything overly new or overly revolutionary. It is still the same game, just with a reskin, basically. But this was my opportunity to sort of reminisce and look back on a title that wasn't so popular, wasn't so well received. Well, no, that's not fair. The game was really well received. It just wasn't as popular and didn't get as much traction and attention as perhaps it should have. So, anyways, with all of that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. This has been Kingdoms of Amalur. If you have any questions about the game, I do remember quite a bit of it from back in the day when I played it, so feel free to ask me down in the comments below. So yeah, that's about it. It feels a lot better on mouse and keyboard right now. I don't know if that was fixed back in the day or this is a new edition fix, but yeah, it feels great. It's a great game. Combat's phenomenal, and I think you should really just play it for the combat. There was also a video I'm gonna direct you towards if well, hell, I hope that video is still up. And still exists and is a thing. Someone, and forgive me for the life of me, I don't remember, but if you just type it in the YouTube search bar, it should come up as the first result. It's a rather popular video someone made. The title was "Why You Should Play Kingdoms of Amalur," and it came out, like, you know, before Re-Reckoning. It's a relatively old video, and there the person basically summarizes the game a little bit differently than how I have, but you know, basically makes some excellent points about why the game is great, and gives you a little bit more detail as to why we never got a sequel, and you know, stuff like that. So yeah, You know, if you're interested by the game, if you're intrigued by how this looks, then head over to that video. But if not, then yeah, this has been it. Thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe down below if you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned with the rest of the content that I produce on the channel. And it really helps it really helps me out quite a bit with the YouTube algorithm and all of that. But if you dislike the video, by all means, leave me a dislike and tell me why. Until next time, have fun, take care, and bye-bye.